Tuesday morning, March 21st, 2023. My last video, old school versus new school baseball analysis. I'm going to do fewest errors by defensive position players. Who had the fewest errors? Errors, E-E-E-R-R-O-R-S, errors, in two different baseball eras, E-R-A-S. First era I consider old school, 1870s, 1949. Second era, 1950, 2022, new school baseball era. So I'm covering fewest errors on the defensive baseball field. Among catchers, who had the fewest? Those who are in the Hall of Fame. Baseball players in the Hall of Fame, who had the fewest errors in the catching position? Excuse me. Roy Campanella, 76 errors. Of course, other catchers in the Hall of Fame played longer, so they would have more errors. First baseman, who has the fewest errors? David Ortiz, again, didn't play as many games, but he only had 22 errors at first base. Second baseman, Jackie Robinson, 68 errors. Fewest. Third baseman, Edgar Martinez, again, didn't play that many games, but he has 78. Shortstop, Lou Bargeron, 223 errors, the lowest. Left field, Tim Raines, 54 errors. Center field, Curly Puckett, 42 errors. And right field, Frank Robinson, 32 errors. So, and among pitchers, Trevor Hoffman and Lee Smith only had 4 errors in their career. Pitching. Of course, the relief pitcher is not going to have as many errors as an everyday starter. But what am I trying to prove here? That among all the position players in the Baseball Hall of Fame, let's add them all up. What do I mean, add them all up? Well, let's see. I've got it right here. I will give you the number of each position player. How many at each position in the Baseball Hall of Fame? I'll start right here. I've got it. Okay, there are 16 catchers. There are 26 first basemen. There are 19 second basemen, 14 third basemen, 23 shortstops, left field, 21 left fielders, center fielders, 17 of them, and in right field, 26. Let's add all those numbers up. Along with the pitchers, there's 75 pitchers. Add all that up and see which era, old school or new school, had the fewest errors among all these position players. And I did it. I've got it right here in this book. I added it up. Fewest defensive errors by new school catches was 955. The old school had 1,300 errors. So fewest would be new school. New school wins among catchers. First base, there were 1,341 errors for new school, but 3,542 for the old school. So new school wins there. Second base, 1,132 errors in new school. Old school, 3,297. New school wins. Third baseman, 1,869 errors in the new school, but there were 1,608 old school. So old school wins there. Shortstop, 2,248 errors in new school, 7,523 old school. New school wins. Left field, 896 errors in new school, 2,092 old school. New school wins. Center field, 546 errors. Old school, 1,601. New school wins. Right field, 778 new school errors by right fielders, but there were 2,062 in the old school era. New school wins. And among pitchers, 1,069 errors by the new school, but 2,540 old school. So who wins? New school wins on fewest errors. So the score there would be 8-1, new school. Now here's what I want to do. I've covered this book extensively with a lot of videos. I started off with 13 offensive categories. Batting, old school wins. Their cumulative batting average was 376. The new school was 340. So old school wins in batting. In hits, most hits in a season. Cumulative hits for the old school era was 207 a season. In the new school era is 201. So old school wins there. Runs scored. Old school cumulative was 121 runs. New school 116. Old school win. RBIs. The old school averaged 119. New school averaged 121. New school wins. Home runs. Old school averaged 22. New school averaged 41. New school wins. Triples. Old school 17. New school 9. Old school wins. Doubles. Old school 51 average. New school 50. Old school wins. Singles. Old school averaged 148 singles. New school 147. Old school wins. Slugging. Old school 595. New school 599. New school wins. On base. Old school 455. New school 433. Old school wins. Total bases. Old school averaged 300. New school averaged 345. New school wins. Base on balls. Old school averaged 89. New school averaged 110. New school wins. And stolen bases. Old school averaged 49. New school averaged 45. Old school wins. So that's 13 categories. Old school wins 8-5. Pitching. In wins, pitching wins. Old school averaged 30. New school averaged 21. Old school wins. Innings. Old school averaged 386. New school 232. Old school wins. Games started. Old school averaged 44. New school averaged 37. Old school wins. Games completed. Old school averaged 38. New school 17. Old school wins. Strikeouts. Old school averaged 204, but the new school 256. New school wins. Shutouts. Old school averaged 6. New school averaged 3. Old school wins. And an ERA. Old school 2.12. New school 2.54. So in those 8 categories, pitching categories, old school wins 7-1. All right. So far we have 8-5 in offense, 8-5 offense, and and 7-1 pitching. So that's 15-6. Now I just covered defensive categories. As far as games played, the old school, among the position players, 9 positions. Old school 6, new school 3. Fielding percentage. New school 9 won all the fielding percentages. Old school 0. So 1-1. Chances. Old school 7. Out of 9 positions on the field, they won 7 of them. New school 2. Old school. Putouts 7-2 old school. Assist 8-1 old school. Double plays 8-1 old school. Innings 7-2 old school. But in fewest errors, the new school had fewer errors than the old school. So that's 7-2. On defensive stats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it's 6-2. Not 7-2, 6-2. So here's the final. 13 offensive categories, 8 pitching, that's 21, and 8 in defense. That's 29 categories I covered. You can check out all the videos. The old school era from 1870s to the 1949 won 21 times in stats. The new school won 8 times. Here's the debatable question. Was the old school baseball era better than the new school present day era? I just did all these stats in this book, and that's what I come out with. The old school won 21 times, and the new school 8 times. Here's something else to consider, all right? I've got it in this book. I'll read a portion of it, all right? Is it safe to say that the old school baseball era were better skilled, experienced, proficient, seasoned, accomplished, and talented than the new school baseball players? Do you think they were better at their craft? 1870 and 1949, all those ball players who played during that era, were they better than the present day players after 1950? You know, the olden times, their playing conditions, equipment, travel, and ballparks was a little harder, wouldn't you say? Traveling by train, bus, cars, eventually when the cars came along. Today's travel, you have airplane. You can go from New York to California in 5 hours, right? Or back then, they had to spend a day on the train, maybe 2 days in the train. But they didn't go past, in the olden times, they didn't go past St. Louis. Now in the newer times, new baseball era, you have to play on both coasts. You have to play up in the north and the south, east and the west. You know, in the olden times, the batting helmets, batting gloves, and the bats weren't as good as they are today. You know, for many, many years, they didn't even have helmets. They got hit in the head, a lot of those players. Eventually, the batting helmets saved a lot of concussions on the head. How about the bats back then? Were they good? Are today's baseball bats better than the olden times? Yet, the old baseball players outperformed the new baseball players. You know, the gloves. Have you seen pictures of the gloves in the olden times? Compare the gloves of today, how they're woven, how they're stitched, the leather. Back then, the gloves were just embarrassing to look at, right? The old school players, they love to play the game. Obviously, new schoolers like to play too, but do you notice that they played hard? I think they played harder back then, and they played as long as they could, and they stayed with the same teams. Of course, the reserve clause was in effect, but today's ball players are moving all over the place. And you know what? A lot of them don't even play a full season. Back then, a lot of those players played the whole season. Even injured, they still played. They played through pain. They didn't come out because their thumb was hurting. They didn't take a day off because they were tired. I'm sorry, new school baseball players today take a day off because it's Sunday. Oh, I'm tired. I don't want to play today. Pathetic. Old schoolers didn't do that. They sat out games, but not like today's players. Ask Lou Gehrig, 2,130 consecutive games. Now, Cal Ripken broke the record, so props to him for playing in the new school era, breaking the record. I like Cal Ripken's attitude. How about the pitchers? Once they started a game, their intention was to finish it. Today's pitchers, 5 innings, 6 innings, sometimes 4 innings. Where are the complete games? Very rare. How about those old school pitchers pitching double headers? How about that one pitcher pitched 3 games in a row? Complete games. They pitched 400 or 500 innings. Today, pitchers, 200, 220 maybe, 250. Very rare you get 300 innings. Yet those guys in the old school time era, 400 innings, 500 innings. Charlie Radburn, 678 innings. Old school players, they would hit it as far as they could, run as fast as they could. They didn't admire their home runs like today's players do. They didn't flip their bats as much. Maybe some did, but today's players are flipping their bats. Hot dog expressions, celebrating. The old schoolers were committed to their one team. They played small ball, they bunted, they moved guys over, hit and run. Today's players are going for the home run so they can get the better paycheck. If they have, and on their stats, a lot of home runs and RBIs, they get more money. Old school players, I don't think they were concerned about it as much. Of course, they didn't get paid as much in the old school era. What am I saying here? I proved it with this book. If you look at the stats, that out of all those categories that I covered, 29 categories, 13 offensive, 8 pitching, and 8 on defense, the old school era won 21-8. That's got to say something. Now, there are more old school Hall of Famers in the Baseball Hall of Famer. Guys from 1870s and 1949. There are more in the Hall of Fame that there are from 1950 to the present. So that would explain why they're winning in a lot of the categories. But I was curious, and that's why I wrote the book, to find out which was a better era. Let me ask you this question. If you had a choice of going to a ball game, would you like to go to today's ball game and watch those players who are performing today, the stars? Or would you like to go back into time and watch the old ball players back in those days? Would you have liked to seen Babe Ruth? I would. Would you have liked to seen Lou Gehrig, Ty Cobb, Stan Musial, Ted Williams, Rogers Hornsby, Ed Delante, Jimmy Fox, Jesse Burkett? How about Hugh Duffy batting .440? How would you have liked to seen Walter Johnson, Cy Young, Pete Alexander, Christy Mathewson? I would. I'd love to have seen all that. Today, you ask me, who would I like to go see a ball game right now? Very few. I'll have to admit it. Now, I would say that after the 1950s, there were a lot of genuine ball players. Henry Aaron, Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle. I could go on and on and on about those players. Frank Robinson, Pete Rose, Kirby Puckett, Tony Gwynn, Lou Brock. Obviously, all these players would have are fun are would be well worth going to watch a game, watch them perform. Bob Feller, he was in the 1940s, wasn't he? Yeah, Bob Feller. So he would be in the old school era. But how about in the new school eras? Which pitchers would you have liked to have seen? Well, Nolan Ryan comes to mind. Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux. Well, you got Steve Carlton, Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale, Juan Marshall, all those guys. Whitey Ford, Robin Roberts, Steve Carlton, John Smoltz. Yes, you have a lot of good players, but today, 2022, who would you like to go see watch a ball game right now? If you ask me the question, today's era, who would I go pay money to watch play? Well, I like the Dodgers. Who on the Dodgers would I just pay money to go see play? Freddie Freeman, I like him. Mookie Betts. Who else? Maybe Clayton Kershaw. As far as the other teams, who are the stars? Aaron Judge just hit 62 home runs for the New York Yankees. I guess I go watch. I pay to go watch him slug the ball. Mike Trout, of the Angels. He seems to have a good career going, even though he's injured a lot. Otani, Japanese guy, he's just starting off, so we got to see how he's doing. I guess I go see him play. This era, who else? Bryce Harper, I guess. I guess I'd pay to go see him play. What's my point? I say the old school era was better baseball than new school. Do you agree or disagree? Anyways, that's my analysis on this. I'm going to continue doing videos because I wrote another book, and we'll get into that. It's called The Best Offensive Seasons of All Time, and I'm going to prove to you who had the best offensive seasons and how you rank them. Who do you think's number one? I've got like 400 offensive seasons, and I'm going to rank them. I'll get into those videos next. Thanks for watching. You don't have to agree or disagree. You don't have to agree with me, or you can disagree with me on my analysis. But I've proven the point. Old school versus new school. Sorry, old school wins. Thanks for watching. I'm out.